7. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
And why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening and welcome to Patrick Christys Tonight.
That whatever, if Nigel goes, but I'm not saying he is going to do it.
Yeah.
But he would be a good Prime Minister, I would say that.
Nigel Farage's so-called secret girlfriend speaks on television for the first time in an exclusive interview shortly. She hits back at media rumours, comes out swinging on I'm a Celeb and offers an insight into Nigel Farage that you won't have seen before. Migrant hotel madness as well. The government has been caught out. They said that they were shutting migrant hotels. It turns out that they're just moving them to other hotels instead. But of course, this hasn't stopped Rishi Sunak banging on about Rwanda today. And I've got tomorrow's newspaper front pages today, so you'll be ahead of the game with all of Saturday's news. On the sofa tonight is the top team of the Mail on Sunday's editor-at-large, Charlotte Griffiths. We've got BBC icon John Sargent and the Only Way is Essex star Junaid Ahmed as well. It's a very special episode of Patrick Christys Tonight coming your way. So, yes, I will be bringing you that world exclusive with Laura Ferrari, the woman behind Nigel's throne, as it were. I'm also going to be talking, as well, about COP28 and them taking a series of private jets there. So it's all go after the headlines.
Thanks, Patrick. Good evening. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Our top stories. Greenpeace has accused Rishi Sunak of showing no leadership over climate change after he failed to mention phasing out fossil fuels during his speech at COP28. Addressing the summit in Dubai, the Prime Minister announced £1.6 billion for international climate finance and promised the government's green policies would not hurt taxpayers' pockets. He also urged major polluting countries to follow the UK's lead in slashing emissions.
The United Kingdom is totally committed to net zero, the Paris Agreement, and to keeping 1.5 alive. That's why we've decarbonised faster than any other major economy. Our 2030 target means the deepest cuts of any major emitter, and we're determined to deliver. But instead of putting more pressure on working people, we're choosing a pragmatic new approach. We're ramping up renewables and embracing the opportunities of technology and green industry.
Hamas has attempted multiple rocket attacks on Israel after talks to extend a week-long truce collapsed. Both sides are accusing each other of wrecking the negotiations after Hamas violated the terms of the pause with a strike early this morning. The Israel Defense Forces also say they've struck over 200 terror targets in response, including operational command centres. Mediators from Qatar and Egypt say they're working to try to continue the release of hostages. The former Health Secretary has told the COVID inquiry that Boris Johnson apologised to him for hiring Dominic Cummings. It comes after Matt Hancock told the inquiry that the then PM said sorry over, quote, the damage that Mr Cummings did to the pandemic response. He also said the PM's senior advisor attempted to centralise power to himself and worked without Boris Johnson's approval. The spokesman for Mr Johnson has declined to confirm or deny the claims. Members of ASLEF have voted overwhelmingly to continue strike action for the next 6 months in their ongoing dispute over pay. The announcement comes as members at 16 train companies are refusing to work overtime from today until Saturday. The companies said they will operate as many trains as possible, but some areas may have no services. The union is blaming the government for not negotiating. The Rail Delivery Group says drivers have been offered a £5,000 pay rise. On TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn 2, this is GB News. Back now to Patrick.
I literally couldn't care less about COP28. I think the whole thing is a total farce. The King, David Cameron, Rishi Sunak have all taken separate private jets to go to a talking shop in an oil state to help promote policies that, as far as I can tell, will quite possibly just make poor people poorer. The absolute audacity of billionaires firing goodness knows how much CO2 into the atmosphere to go and meet up with other billionaires so they can encourage Dorothy from number 42 to spend thousands on a heat pump and swallow the cost of a new ULEZ charge that won't make a blind bit of difference to the environment. It's a comedy show. Dr. Sultan Al Jaber is president of the Climate Summit, and he's also the head of the United Arab Emirates State Oil Company. Is that not a little bit like putting an XL bully in charge of childcare at the local nursery? Now, in an absolutely shocking turn of events that nobody could have seen coming, it turns out that the UAE was planning to use the Climate Summit, where the world's leaders all gather, to strike more oil and gas deals. There is something quite telling, I think, about where they've decided to host this Climate Summit. So, in Dubai, a place where protesters would be banned from entering or detained immediately if they kicked off, plonking a very controversial Climate Summit in a place where no opposition is allowed is actually quite a good example of the kind of totalitarian climate stuff that very often goes on. The whole thing, in my view, is quite totalitarian. Banning new petrol and diesel cars, using contested science to drive forward unpopular policies. Sadiq Khan in London stands accused of misleading the public over the benefits of ULEZ by using alleged misinformation in adverts. The adverts, which were broadcast and published between January and June, claimed that the existing ULEZ in central London had, quotes, almost halved the levels of nitrogen dioxide and that most air pollution-related deaths actually occur in outer London. But a draft of a watchdog's conclusions leaked to the Sunday Telegraph found that the ULEZ adverts were misleading because they did not clarify that claims about NO2 levels were based on estimates or model scenarios and not actual figures. It's the modelling again, isn't it? But every time you blink, more of your hard-earned money is being given away by our politicians to push the big green agenda. You might have missed this, but Rishi Sunak is giving about £1.6 billion to restore the United Kingdom's reputation as a leader in tackling climate change by committing to spend the money on projects in Africa and Asia and tackle deforestation and energy innovation. He should be using that money to restore his reputation at home, if you ask me. Who do these world leaders think they are? Just look at the way they live their lives. They are the ones damaging the environment, not us. Stop paying. Stop making us pay for all of your pointless vanity projects. But let's get the thoughts of my panel. Former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent joins us, TOWIE star Junaid Ahmed, and editor-at-large for The Mail on Sunday. It is Charlotte Griffiths. Charlotte, I'll start with you. Look, it's very, very contested, this stuff at COP28. How do you feel about the, I would call it hypocrisy, of certainly three of our dignitaries all using separate private jets to go there?
Yeah, you'd think they'd all team in together. I mean, when the Queen died, they all shared a private jet, the royals, but King Charles wasn't exactly sharing his private jet. I just think Dubai is the least natural place in the world. It's like a man-made city, just completely and utterly not natural. And there they are, sort of saying, let's sort of get back to nature and save Mother Nature. Well, they chose the wrong venue for that, I think.
John, your views on all of this. Do you think it's a necessity that we have to have all of these global elites meeting in one place to decide how we sort out the climate crisis?
Well, no, it'd be wonderful, Patrick, but yours is a counsel of despair. You know, you're so... Why can't we only talk to democracies? Why can't we only talk to people who are not dictators? Why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do that? The world is as it is. We've got to try everything we can. And it's not an excuse for saying, because we can't do everything, we don't do anything. I mean, you know, we can't do everything means you've got to keep trying. And you particularly need to try with these oil-producing states. Now, if you say, oh, we're not going to go there, because all they'll be talking about is oil deals behind the corner, or they'll turn up in private jets. The cost of this, in terms of the private jets, is minimal compared with all the airline flights that are taking place every day. The cost, if you can try and get some people convinced, BP, for example, is now... BP, for example, is an oil producer.
Absolutely
No, that's if you assume that the whole world is to do with optics. No, the whole world is to do with real things. And the real fact, which I think most people now realise, particularly this year, is that climate change is here with us, and it's causing devastating effects in terms of flooding, in terms of extreme temperatures. And if you don't think that, well, go ahead and bury your head in the sand. But if you do think that, and you think something should be done, then at least try getting other people together, all sorts of improbable characters, get them together as soon as you can, try and get them to talk seriously about what we should do. But if you then say, oh, why bother? Well, then what are we going to do for the rest of our days? We're just going to say, don't let's bother.
Do you know, how do you feel about the climate crisis, so-called climate crisis? Does it bother you? Does it keep you awake at night?
I mean, I definitely probably think about other things than the climate crisis itself. I think I'm probably too busy maybe looking at myself or how to improve my own life. But I think with this situation itself, I think the fact that they want to make such a big change with it, I have to agree with Charlotte, the fact that they've all travelled separately, it doesn't kind of make a lot of sense with that. They could have potentially changed location, maybe could have jumped on a tube. You wouldn't catch me on the Central Line, but, you know...
No, too hot.
Too hot on the Central Line for me. But they could have maybe potentially changed location, somewhere nearer, where it doesn't cost as much, and just slight little changes could have made it a bit better, but... That's my personal
I think, Johnny, you have got a very optimistic view of this, which I commend, fine, but, Charlotte, should the King have been there? Because now I don't think you can really separate the politics of the climate agenda with it being a worthy cause. And I just wonder if he should have got involved in that. He's wearing his Greek tie as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was wearing his
Shout out to the Elgin Marbles.
He definitely should have been there. I have to disagree with you on that because, as we all know, he's been preaching about climate change since, well, people say it's for 60 years. I mean, literally since he was an adult. And I think it completely transcends political affiliations. And he kept what he was saying very broad, actually, and was very careful not to make it too political. And it was almost the point of being quite wishy-washy. But, you know, he really just reminded people this is about nature. You know, he's a real naturalist, isn't he? And he, like, hugged trees. He literally hugs trees and things like that. So
I think the question I often used to ask with these things is, what if he had been told he couldn't go? What if he'd been told that he'd spent all his life working away on this, people sneering at him, laughing at him and so on. But when he becomes king, we won't even let him say anything. And that would have been awful. It would have been awful for him personally, awful for all of us. It would have seemed so petty not to let him. He, in fact, played it, I thought, brilliantly today. I thought he was extremely careful. He didn't say anything. He said how serious it all was, but he didn't say, and my government's got it wrong or anything like that. So I think it was, you know, it was a rather nice, rather moving way in which you can say, this man who's Prince of Wales becomes king, feels strongly about something, and of course should be allowed to speak about it in general terms, not in political terms, and certainly not in party political terms, not saying, let's wait for Keir Starmer to take over, or anything like that. No, he was very careful what he said. He was well within his rights, and I thought it was rather nice and rather moving to see him actually take his position as king.
I just worry, Janae, whether or not the little guy on the street, the average man and woman out there, who doesn't emit that much carbon, who doesn't really have anything massively directly to blame for the climate crisis that we've got at the moment, they're the ones who are made to pay. Things like ULEZ, for example, that was very controversial.
Yeah.
You know, loads of people there have had to either sell their cars, and people are struggling with the cost of living crisis at the moment. There's stories about nurses who work night shifts, right? So they might go to work at 11 p.m, say, so they get done by the ULEZ on the way in, and then they get done by it on the way out when they come off shift at 8 a.m. or whatever it is. Do you think there is a sense that maybe the little people are the ones who are really paying for this stuff?
I think with any sort of changes like this, I think they are going to affect the people that potentially aren't able to afford any sort of changes and able to adapt to these changes, which does make it more difficult. I think from a personal point of view, it's a shame, really. I think there's so much that is kind of changing. It is affecting so many people in whatever kind of status they're in reality. And I think, is it helping? Is it not helping? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Someone like me, I'm quite young, I'm out there, I like to live a nice life, and it's like, can everyone keep up with this? Is it something that everyone can continue to do with all the change that I'm making? What is the next potential thing that's going to be a big shock? Do you know what I mean?
It always seems to cost. This is the thing. You know, where are we finding this 1.6 billion quid to give to whatever the heck that is? You know, something to do with wind farms in the Middle East, and maybe helping out with, you know, kind of lesser developed countries if they have a climate disaster. You know, we've got people in this country, Charlotte, who are really, really struggling and being told that, oh, we're not really going to lower your taxes at any time soon. We're going to pump more funding into this, more funding into that. We're not going to be able to give you help with, you know, heating your homes this winter. And then they say, well, we've got more than 1.5 billion quid to give to people we'll never meet.
Yeah, I agree with that, because if 1.5 billion quid is going to Africa, it's going to be a drop in the ocean. Africa's a very big place.
Also, no offence, but will it be spent in the... We don't know.
Yeah, it's untraceable. It's totally untraceable. And we're thinking all our hard-earned tax is going some mystery country far away, and it's probably not going to be managed properly, because, let's face it, these things never are when they're sent abroad. And that is going to really frustrate people, I think.
OK, all right. Well, look, we're going to just park it there for now. I'll be returning to my wonderful panel very, very shortly. But are the royals feeling closer or further apart, as Ahmed Scobie's book has stirred the royal pot? So, obviously, the revelations are all out there, aren't they? We are choosing not to name the couple of alleged royal racists, but I will be joined by royal commentator Judita De Silva and Charlotte Griffiths, back at it again on Money's Worth tonight, to share their thoughts on all of this. But up next in the clash, now, Joe Bartosh goes head-to-head with Katie John Went to debate whether or not trans activists are having too much influence on government policy. Very controversial topic, this, and whether or not, you know, this is all fine, it's progressive, or actually, is it really damaging kids, and should we open our eyes to it? You won't want to miss that. It will get fiery. Stay tuned.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Up next, we will discuss whether the King was right to go to COP28, but now it's time for the clash. Well, the NHS have been swept up in a scandal for giving so-called puberty blockers to children who identify as trans. There are growing concerns about the safety of this medication, so some people are surprised that the NHS have been dishing it out at double the demand, actually, since last year. Gender-critical feminist Dr Kathleen Stock wrote in The Telegraph today, NHS England has already announced that blockers should only be administered as part of a clinical trial. Why then, you might ask, are young patients not only still getting them, but getting them at higher rates than before? Part of the answer relates to the current chaos in youth gender services, which, despite the best efforts, are still heavily dependent on a discredited clinical model. And this is really the framing of this discussion now. Do certain pro-trans groups have too much influence when it comes to medical and political policy? Could it well be a normalisation of child abuse? What do you think? Are trans activists having too much influence over government policy? Let me know your thoughts. You can email me now, gbviews@gbnews.com. You can, of course, tweet us at GBNews. To debate this, I'm joined by journalist Josephine Bartosh and diversity and inclusion facilitator Katie John Wen. Both of you, thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to this. Joe, I'll start with you. Do you think that activist groups have got far too much influence when it comes to policy, both medical and political, and that actually could well be leading to a type of child abuse?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the whole creation of the idea of the transgender child is a nonsense. There isn't any medical basis to the idea that you can be born into the wrong body. There are some people who have gender dysphoria, and obviously sympathy for that condition is entirely valid, but that doesn't mean children can be born into the wrong body. If we were to still use language like transsexual, I think the idea of a transsexual child would rightly be very alarming to people. But essentially, by putting children on untested drugs, which a court have ruled were experimental, we are potentially sterilising and mutilating a generation of children, the majority of whom we know would otherwise grow up to be lesbian or gay. So yes, I do think it's fair to call this child abuse.
Katie, I'll ask the same question to you. I mean, do you feel as though this is in some way child abuse?
I wouldn't agree with the language, no. At a personal level, I do believe in caution around children and trans, because yeah, I do agree to some extent. Yeah, is there such a thing as a trans child? No, there's a child who's growing up who may develop gender dysphoria, who may develop an expression or identity in life that is outside the norm, outside the binary, outside typical expressions, and that should be kind of monitored and accommodated at a social level, not necessarily at a medical invasive level at all during someone's early years. I mean, I've always been cautious on kind of child and teen transition, but hindsight is a 5-letter word. And at the end of the day, when you're looking back in life, if you find that the only way to solve your gender dysphoria, having tried perhaps many other sources of help, including therapy, if the only source of help has been that one thing, transition, then typically you will have wanted to have had it earlier. But then, as I say, hindsight's a 5-letter word.
Look, Joe, what are the kind of stats on this stuff, though, or the general perception? You know, I mean, does it actually help kids? Or, I mean, I certainly am quite concerned that we're going to end up with a generation of children who have been deeply scarred in more ways than one as a result of trans activists getting a hold of government policy and healthcare policy.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen recently NHS trusts using software that was developed at a cost of £40 million, and it recorded the gender identity of babies, of newborn babies. Now, when journalists pushed back and asked the trust about that, the trust told them that it had been an error, but actually the press release made it very clear that it had taken a lot of research and consideration and time to come up with this. And the categories included things like cisgender. Now, that is an entirely ideological category, not a medical one. And it's really, really concerning when it comes to healthcare in particular, where it's vitally important to know what sex somebody is, that this sort of identity nonsense can get fed into policy.
OK, now, Casey, why are groups like Stonewall and other groups, they're not the only one at all, by the way, so keen on pushing all of this stuff? So keen, do you think, on getting into the minds of young children and pushing stuff that can change them for life? I mean, do you not think that's maybe quite dangerous, really?
Well, if I can segue just off the end of the previous question that Joe responded to as well, because I was speaking to NHS staff just this week and they were asking me questions and I responded to exactly that kind of question around, do you record sex or gender? I say, well, for a child, you record sex, and as someone grows, you may record gender identity or transition as an additional component, but you should always record sex as well. I know people both going from male to female, female to male, who have actually gone back to the NHS and say, can I have my sex marker changed back to my birth sex so that I get proper NHS care? Because I, as someone who started life as male, identifies to somebody as a trans person now, I don't use the female language, but ultimately I can still get prostate cancer, a little bit less likely because I've taken estrogen, but someone who was born female can still get female health conditions. And so as a result, the NHS does need to monitor sex. And so, I mean, I'm completely in support of that. So sometimes there's a lot of what I would call misguided allyship. And then when you talk about organizations like Stonewall, and I was kind of involved in some of the engagement, not as a trans person, but with Ruth Hunt when they went LGBT. So I was aware of what was going on at that point and the discussions. And these things were done out of a good heart, you might say, rather than kind of a conspiracy theory. And that is true also of NHS staff. They generally speaking, are trying to put patient care and individuals first, trying to humanize people, but sometimes overt allyship makes a mistake.
Now, Joe, I saw you raising your eyebrows at something there. What was that?
Oh, well, I know that Stonewall got a large donation from the Arcus Foundation for explicitly extending what they did to include the T, to add the T to the LGB. So it wasn't an entirely, I don't think it was an entirely...
Well, that's interesting. No, that's interesting. Let me delve into that a little bit, because there's always the question asked to a lot of people, who funds you? Who funds you? That's a very typical question when you're in politics, when you're in current affairs, and you're in media. Do you think that it's worthwhile asking that question about some groups like Stonewall? Because if that does influence the kind of stuff that they put out there, and that stuff then influences government policy, and it is combined with a lot of fear, the heavy dose of language like you're a transphobe, etc., to really double down on that, you know, is that something that people should look into, Joe?
Absolutely. I think there's been a shocking lack of transparency. So essentially when Ruth Hunt took over, same-sex marriage had been achieved and there wasn't that much to do. So that's why it was expanded to include, in my opinion, that's why it was included to include the T. And now, to me, it seems obvious that there was antagonism between the LGB and the T because one is based on identity, on who you feel you are, and the other is based on who you are attracted to on a biological level. So, there's a tension there to start with. Now, when it comes to funding, there's a group called ILGA. Now, they produced a report with a global law firm which advised trans groups to lobby their governments to get ahead of the law when it came to gender self-identification. So that's why Stonewall were accused of representing the law as they wanted it to be rather than it is. So we've ended up with a de facto system of gender self-identification spread across the 850 organisations that were once paid members of Stonewall.
Okay. All right, now, obviously, Stonewall are not here to defend themselves, and we can't, make any further allegations, really, about them. There's no doubt there's a few bits and bobs that they would dispute. Katie, I'll just final one to you, if that's all right, Katie, which is, do you think that as a society we always had thousands, millions of children in every single generation who were walking around feeling as though they'd been born into the... Oh, we'll never find out because Katie's just gone. Oh, well, there we go. That brings us to it. I was going to ask whether or not we thought that we'd always had millions of children walking around feeling as though they'd been born into the wrong body and really struggling with that, or whether this is something that maybe has been planted into some people's minds through the education system, etc. Katie's back. Good stuff. Katie, so I'll just throw it back to you. So, look, yeah, basically, do you think that we've always had millions of kids walking around feeling as though they've been born into the wrong body, or are we seeing an increase in that now because it's actually being planted in their minds?
I don't think it's overtly being planted in their minds. I don't think we have always had this number of kids, as you put it. I do think that we should, in the same way that we should perhaps ask questions about funding, whether that's funding of media, funding of organisations or anything, I do think asking questions is always right. Asking questions of the individual who say they are trans, yes, you should ask the questions. Okay. Where did this come from? How long have you felt this? Why do you feel this? And I do think there has been a kind of an increase. Part of the increase is down to kind of, I wouldn't call it advertising, but the very fact that you can find out about it now, and it's less rare because it is known about. But I think there are many reasons why people are trans, and I think there are people for whom being trans is the wrong thing, and that's why we have detransitions. And I think it is fair to ask all of those questions. We've got to create an environment in which it is okay to ask those questions without being accused of being a transphobe for asking them, and in order to be able to actually put the child or the young adult's best interests at heart. And for that, we have a paucity of mental health services. So that's the area of service that should be being boosted in addition to kids.
Yeah, I think people have a right to be very concerned about if, like, Stonewall gets involved in other groups. Again, I want to emphasise, just using Stonewall here because they're kind of the most famous one, right? But other groups as well, they get involved with government policy, they get involved with businesses, they get involved in every single aspect, it seems, of a lot of life. And there does appear to be a lot of fear about any pushback to that. And when they have real influence and when real children are involved with it, I raise some serious questions about that. But both of you, look, thank you very, very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Informative stuff on both sides. As journalist Joe Bartosh there and diversity and inclusion facilitator Katie John won't get your views coming in. GBViews at gbnews.com. I'll go to the inbox shortly. But coming up, the Royals, they're back under the microscope because Omid Scobie's new book is continuing to cause controversy. He's coming out and saying, oh, it was an honest mistake, I didn't do anything, it was the translator's fault. The translators come out and said, no, it wasn't, it was your fault. People then pointing the finger at Meghan Markle. People close to Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have said they definitely didn't brief Omid Scobie. Look, what's really going on here? I'll be joined by royal commentator Judita De Silva and Charlotte Griffiths to share their thoughts on whether this could be another chink in the royal armour. I will also, of course, be giving you an exclusive interview with Nigel Farage's not-so-secret girlfriend. The first time that Lord Ferrari has ever spoken on national television, on television at all. And she'll be revealing an insight into what life is like with Nigel, what his ambitions might be when he comes out of the jungle, and also clearing up some rumours and some mistruths that have been reported in recent days and weeks. You don't want to miss that. See you in a sec.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, now, it's been another incredibly busy week in the royal household. So early Dutch copies of Scobie's poison-filled Endgame suggested that Kate, and somebody else as well, were potentially making remarks about Archie's skin colour. But it comes as King Charles has flown out to the COP28 conference, a move some of his critics have said unnecessarily involves him in politics. Has all of this rocked the royal boat even further? I'm joined now by royal commentator Judita De Silva and editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday. It is Charlotte Griffiths. Judita, I'll start with you on all of this. Look, how do you think that the royals in question are emerging when it comes to this race row?
It's an interesting one because they've navigated all the napalm that has come as a result of the exodus of Harry and Meghan very well, because it's one of those things that it's seen as give it time, people will move on, and it has happened. The issue with this is that since the Oprah interview, it keeps coming back, because one of the worst accusations you can level at anyone is to call them a racist. That's why it keeps coming back. So I think it's one of those things that they might find themselves needing to definitively address it some way. But then you have the issue of you cannot have 2 rogue people decide what the agenda and the way you move is for the royal family. They've got to be greater than that. They've got to be beyond that. So it's a very difficult thing to navigate, and that's why I understand why they say the firm is exploring all options.
Do you think they should sue?
I don't think they should sue, but I think they sort of threatened to scare Omid a little bit, but I just don't think they will. And I actually don't think they should. It's too complicated because Charles is the head of the courts, you know.
Yeah.
His name is on the court documents.
Yeah.
It would just be too much of a mess. But I think the fact they've let it be known that it's a suable issue is quite good for them because it might calm the whole thing down.
OK. I think public support has actually gone behind. You know, look, I am getting a directive now that it is OK to actually say what was in this book, which is, I think, actually probably for the best because everyone really knows as well, don't they? But it was clearly Kate and Charles who were the 2 royals who were suggested were the ones who made that comment about Harry and Meghan's first child, Archie, which actually, to be honest with you, frees up this conversation. Do you think that Kate's popularity will take a hit from this at all, or there's no sign of it, is there?
I think until The problem, what has happened is Omid Scobie's credibility has been so tarnished, people are not going to die on the cross of what he said. And until Harry and Meghan come out and actually make a statement, because this is kind of filtered down from you allegedly, no one's going to really want to die on the hill of saying this is exactly what happened, I'm going for it. And people have come out in the past 24 to 48 hours and said that actually from inside sources, it's not Charles or Kate, it's someone else. So the waters are so muddied right now, no one's going to be willing to lance at Kate and believe that this is the gospel and this is exactly what happened. It's too unreliable.
Yeah, I mean, it is too unreliable. But like you were saying to you there as well, Charles has come out and said he's just about surviving. I mean, this obviously this would affect anyone's family. It would affect absolutely anybody's family at all. And a little bit later on, I'm talking actually to Nigel Farage's girlfriend, her first ever TV interview. One of the issues that I addressed with her is these allegations of racism that are levelled against Nigel, for example. If anyone was being accused of racism, it does have an impact to you. And our royal family are not immune to that, are they?
No, exactly. And Charles said at COP something along the lines of, I'm just about surviving. And I really felt for him, actually, because this has been levelled at his daughter-in-law, which we can now say. He's really fond of his daughter-in-law. He's worked tirelessly to never put a foot wrong, in public at least. And, it's also been levelled at him by his own son. So there's so many layers of betrayal here for Prince Charles. It's just a complete mess. And if I was him, I'd be really gutted. He's just become king and now he's having to face all this all over again.
You were giving us a little sneak preview, I believe, anyway, of what might be on the front of your paper tomorrow, or possibly somewhere near it.
Go on. Well, what seems to be emerging is that sources very close to Meghan and Harry have briefed The Telegraph, which we know is one of their favoured newspapers, and said that they never wanted these two names to come out. And it's a really clever thing to do, and it's an irritating thing to do for the royal family, because they're basically saying, yeah, it is those two, but we didn't want to ever say it was those two.
That's interesting.
They're not saying, it wasn't my... Harry's not coming out and saying, it wasn't my father, I love my father, he would never do something like this, it was only unconscious bias. He's saying, we didn't want these names to come out like this.
That is actually a really fascinating line on this, then, because everyone, well, not everyone, a lot of people were saying, well, you've got to come out and publicly distance yourself from this now. That's what you've got to do if you care about your family, and if this isn't true. But actually, they've basically confirmed it.
Yes, whilst appearing to be saying, we didn't want this, we're such goody two-shoes, but actually, yeah, confirming it, don't you think?
That's quite strong, isn't it?
No, because I did say it like months ago that when they had the alleged statement saying that we're not going to be talking about the royal family anymore, we want to move on, they've got nothing else. There's no other USP to the Harry and Meghan brand, particularly in America, that's so vicious as to keep their attention. They're going to have to revisit this in some way, but what other ground do you have to cover? This reignites possibly the most column-garnering story they have about them. And that statement kind of leans into we're disengaging but still feeding the flame. And that is very problematic for them because you're not practicing what you preach.
No. And also, it's just annoying because it's like doublespeak, isn't it, again? It really is. It's a little bit like you get politicians coming out and say, look, we're doing everything we can with this, and then it emerges that literally the day before they've just pushed through a policy that does the opposite of what they say. Do you think that the public are just going to get absolutely sick of Harry and Meghan doing this, of being quite duplicitous, some would argue, in this way?
Yeah, I think the public are kind of sick of it. I mean, completely sick of it. I think back when it originally happened, they said recollections may vary, and then William said we're very much not a racist family, and the world has moved on now. And the fact it's come up again, there's the nation's sort of giving Charles and Kate the benefit of the doubt, aren't they? There's no pile-on. I haven't seen a pile-on. People have moved on, and they're hoping that Charles and Kate aren't racist.
Yeah, basically. I mean, and that's the hope, I suppose. I wonder whether or not it's going to have a generational issue, though. These kind of things stay with you.
Yeah.
And, the Gen Z type at the moment, all you have to do now is go on Google. We saw it, again, a bit in the jungle, didn't we, when Nella was saying, oh, well, the internet says you're a racist, Nigel. The internet says you're a racist. Well, this stuff will be all out there on the internet now. And will that have a problem for the royals with the younger generation?
That's what I said, that this is such one of those unique accusations that you can't walk away from. You have to address it. But they have to navigate how they're going to do it, because then you don't want to look like Harry and Meghan still pull the strings for how we operate. But to have racism swirling around the brand, by the time William comes to the throne, it's going to be an issue. And people will remember that something that bad came into your circle and you refused to address it. It's not keep calm and carry on. It's engage, debunk it, and prove that it is something that isn't true.
OK. Now, Sean, I'd already asked you this, so I'll stay with you for now. Do you think that King Charles was right to go to COP28? Because it's difficult, I think, in this particular moment in time to disassociate the political from the eco.
I think he was right to go, because he's been an environmentalist since it wasn't even cool to talk about, and people would laugh at him and think that this was just a fad. And the fact that he stayed the course means that he has a lot of credibility. And just think about the optics of it. Showing the most important people from around the world coming together to discuss this issue is what the Gen Zs have been asking for, is what Greta Thunberg talks about, that you can't just stand to the side and let us deal with the problem when it comes along. Show that it matters to you, take action, and that's what he's doing.
I would argue he got involved in another deeply political thing, though, because he was wearing that Greek tie. Obviously, his dad was kind of behind the scenes, affectionately known as Phil the Greek, wasn't he? So that is really political at the moment, which is to do with the Elgin Marbles. OK, so Sunak refused to meet the Greek leader. Keir Starmer met him anyway. Then there was a bit of a quotes-unquote hissy fit, which Rishi Sunak denies, about whether or not the Greeks should definitively come out and say the Elgin Marbles belong to Britain, but we would like to loan them. I mean, King Charles didn't have to get involved in that, did he?
No, but I wonder whether, just being a bit of a conspiracy theorist, he thought he'd just pile on something else that we can talk about that isn't the racism thing. So now we're talking about him being at COP in general, you know, whether it's political or not, and is he getting involved in the Greek debacle, and is that tie really a Greek flag or isn't it? I mean, quite a lot of column inches have been dedicated to that today.
It looks a lot like the Greek flag.
And it takes a little bit of space away from the Harry and Meghan nonsense. It does look a lot like it. And the pocket square was Greek as well.
It's a bit on the nose, actually.
Conversation somewhere else.
Might as well have come in riding a donkey and smashing plates. You know, I could say that. I'm half Greek, all right, back off. Now, all right, OK, well, look, that's basically it. That's basically it for us now. I think we've got something else to bring you very, very shortly. But thank you very, very much. That was Raw commentator Judita De Silva and editor-at-large Daily Mail, Charlotte Griffiths. OK, so coming up, yes, there is, well, it's an exclusive. A big exclusive, actually, with Nigel Farage's no longer secret girlfriend, Law Ferrari. She was getting badgered by a lot of media outlets, but she decided, obviously, that GBNews was the place to get her story out there. She's let loose on what it's like to live with Nigel and her thoughts on his chances of being Prime Minister. You won't want to miss that. She addresses a lot of rumours that have been flying around recently as well. There's a little taster of what's to come.
That whatever, you know, if Nigel goes, but I'm not saying he is going to do it.
Yeah.
But he would be a good Prime Minister. I would say that.
But next, English football hooligans are, you know, something of history, aren't they? They get a bad rep. But last night it kicked off big time at Villa Park. But it wasn't the English fans doing it. No, it was foreign football hooligans. Well, here to find out whether or not English fans still get a bad rep, I thought I would speak to the most famous football fan in the country.
Fly up, Pompey! Pompey, fly up!
Yeah, it'd be great. I'm speaking to die-hard Pompey FC fan John, Portsmouth Football Club, Westwood, after Aston Villa fans did say that all hell broke loose before the European fixture with Liga Warsaw yesterday. Are English footy fans getting a bad rep that they don't deserve? Stay tuned.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, last night, 46 people were arrested outside Villa Park ahead of a football match between Aston Villa and League of Warsaw after violence broke out. Some of the scenes were absolutely disgraceful. Police officers were attacked, there were flares being lit, there was missiles being thrown into the crowd. It was terrible. 4 officers were injured in the clashes, with, crucially, away fans, foreign football thugs. West Midlands Police said that their officers, who had flares thrown at them, amongst other stuff, were faced with disgusting and highly dangerous scenes from fans of the Polish club. Now, we do seem to see English football fans get such a bad reputation all over the world. I mean, this specific bout of violence has been attributed to their side visiting Villa Park, but football hooliganism is always associated with the English, and everyone seems to want to have a go at us, don't they, whenever we travel abroad. Just look at the way the French police attacked those Liverpool fans ahead of that Champions League encounter a couple of seasons ago. Well, I want to know why English footy fans are always blamed, despite not actually that often doing much wrong, as far as I can tell. Earlier, I spoke to a very familiar face. He's Pompey fan, John Portsmouth Westwood, and he gave us his thoughts. I'm just going to ask you firstly, if you think that English football fans get an unfair reputation, do you think, when it comes to violence?
England fans do get an unfair reputation. I mean, obviously, we had a violent element years ago, but that was 20, 30 years ago. But it still seems to surround us. I mean, England fans get targeted by the authorities when we're abroad. They get targeted by opposing fans, i.e. the Russians and things like this. And there's other clubs around the world who are far worse than us, or other countries, i.e. the Russians and things like this, and the Poles. And look at what happened with Brazil and Argentina the other night. And you don't get any major disorder. I know we had some at the European Cup final against Italy, but apart from that, we don't get any more now. And it's that people, the authorities and other fans are living in the past, in my opinion.
OK, and why do you think, though, why do you think that British football fans have such a bad reputation? I mean, was it worse, say, in the 70s and the 80s, and it's all moved on now?
it was definitely worse than the 70s and the 80s. We had a very violent reputation, and you can't deny that. And it was, you know, you look back, but the past is the past. We haven't, the police and the authorities have clamped down on it in this country now, but we still, the authorities and the fans from the other countries who have followed us, they're trying to emulate us and try to be like, I would say, like the Millwall of the. We're basically like the Millwall of international football. We've had this violent reputation, and we don't seem to be able to get rid of it. And it's something on our back, and we do get targeted without a doubt. And it is really frustrating because the football in this country isn't that violent. There's still an element there, of course there is. There always will be. When you get passion and football and winning and losing and rivalries, you're always going to have some element that is going to latch onto that. But no, we are very fairly untreated, I think. And I think it's a throwback. People haven't grasped the fact that we've moved on, but they don't seem to have. And we're an easy target. We're an easy target.
That's an important point, actually, about being an easy target, because what I think happens, and we've seen it at international tournaments, seen it at World Cups, we've seen it at the Euros, and I suspect we saw it last night at Villa Park, actually, where people whose clubs don't often play English teams get the chance to play English teams or the English national team, and because of our reputation for quite enjoying a scrap back in the day, they see that as their opportunity and they pile in, not realising that we've changed, we've outgrown it.
Exactly. You couldn't have put it better, really. We've outgrown it, we've moved on, and they're trying to prove themselves against us. We've got nothing to prove because we're not trying to prove anything these days. Years ago, it would have happened and, you know, they would have had a good battle, but nowadays, they're just living off our past reputation. They want to try and prove themselves. We're like the big guy in the playground, and the little ones want to come up and prove themselves. Where the big guy doesn't really not bothered anymore. He's done it. He's proved it, and they've moved on. And it's a real strange one, if I'm honest. And it's something that needs looking at more by the authorities and by the international authorities. That England isn't this violent set of fans anymore. We still.
Yeah, there we go. All right. So, look, coming up, my world exclusive interview with Nigel Farage's other half, Laura Ferrari. Now, she shares some explosive lines with me about what it's like to live with a man and also his potential political ambitions going forward as well. They also address some recent things that have been put out there in the press, and she clears up a few rumours about her being a secret girlfriend, about things about whether or not she was put on his payroll and all of that kind of stuff. Also, there were allegations as well about whether or not she's really going out to Australia. And she doesn't hold back when it comes to the way she thinks Nigel has been treated in the jungle and people in the jungle who are giving him a little bit of stick. There's a little taster here of something that's to come.
That whatever, you know, if Nigel goes back, I'm not saying he is going to do it.
Yeah.
But he would be a good Prime Minister, I would say that. And I think he would do a good job at it.
OK, so I promise you, it is an unfiltered interview, and I think it definitely shows Nigel in a rather unique light about what life is like to support and to live with and to love one of the most notorious men in British politics. So all of that is coming your way very, very shortly, right here on Patrick Christys Tonight. You will not want to miss it. I'll see you in a tick.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Turning cold out there this evening, and it's going to stay pretty cold for most of us this weekend. Ice and snow showers in places and a pretty hard frost. Low pressure kind of drifting away from the UK, so the cold air that's in place isn't going anywhere. Some fog thickening up tonight as well. And we have Met Office yellow warnings in place. Wherever we've got showers, there's the potential for ice. Now, these showers will have some sleet and snow mixed in over eastern England, southwest Scotland, northwest England and northern Scotland. And as I say, we've got some mist and fog thickening up too, particularly particularly dense over parts of the Midlands as temperatures drop to -3, -4. That's in towns and cities. So a hard frost for Saturday. For many, it'll be a fine, bright, sunny day, but it'll take a while for the fog to clear. The showers should clear away from eastern England. We'll keep a few going in southwest Scotland, northwest England, with some snow over the hills. The odd rain shower for Wales and southwest England. But as I say, for most, dry and sunny but cold. Temperatures 1 or 2 degrees, particularly if that fog lingers, maybe a little higher in the southwest. Slightly milder air comes in across the south during Sunday. There could well be some sleet and snow for a time on Sunday morning over the Midlands and eastern England, and then the potential for more wet weather to come in later in the southwest. That could also have some snow mixed in, chiefly over hills. It is slowly trying to turn milder across the south, but for many, Sunday's another cold one. Goodbye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. and this is Patrick Christys Tonight.
I mean, look, I've never heard Nigel say anything racist, you know.
Well, Nigel Farage's so-called secret girlfriend speaks on television for the first time in an exclusive interview, and that's coming your way very, very shortly. She hits back at media rumours, she comes out swinging on I'm a Celebrity, and she offers an insight, a genuine insight, into Nigel Farage and what their life together is like that, frankly, you will not have seen before. In other news, migrant hotel madness because the government has been caught out. Yes, they said that they were shutting migrant hotels. Well, it turns out they've just been moving them to other hotels instead. But this hasn't stopped Rishi banging on about Rwanda today.
Paul Kagame is obviously, we have a deep partnership with Rwanda, which he's committed to, as am I.
Yeah, we are, in the sense that we keep giving them shed loads of money for a load of people that we're not actually sending there. But I've got tomorrow's newspaper front pages today, so you will be ahead of the game with all of tomorrow's news and on the sofa tonight. It's my top team. The Mail on Sunday's editor-at-large, Charlotte Griffiths. We've got the BBC icon, John Sargent, and the Only Way is Essex star, Junaid Ahmed. Absolutely top panel. It's a very special hour coming your way on Patrick Christys Tonight. Very shortly, I will bring you that exclusive with Laura Ferrari, the woman behind Nigel's throne, as it were. It's the first time that she's spoken on television. We're going to go to that after the headlines.
Thanks, Patrick. Good evening. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Our top stories. Greenpeace has accused Rishi Sunak of showing no leadership over climate change after he failed to mention phasing out fossil fuels during his speech at COP28. Addressing the summit in Dubai, the PM announced £1.6 billion for international climate finance, and he promised that the government's green policies would not hurt taxpayers' pockets. He also urged major polluting countries to follow the UK's lead in slashing emissions.
The United Kingdom is totally committed to net zero, the Paris Agreement, and to keeping 1.5 alive. That's why we've decarbonised faster than any other major economy. Our 2030 target means the deepest cuts of any major emitter, and we're determined to deliver. But instead of putting more pressure on working people, we're choosing a pragmatic new approach. We're ramping up renewables and embracing the opportunities of technology and green industry.
Hamas has fired multiple rocket attacks at Israel after talks to extend a week-long truce collapsed. Both sides are accusing each other of wrecking the negotiations after Hamas violated the terms of the pause with a strike early this morning. The Israel Defense Forces say they've struck over 200 terror targets in response, including operational command centres. Mediators from Qatar and Egypt say they're working to try to continue the release of hostages. The former Health Secretary has told the COVID inquiry that Boris Johnson apologised to him for hiring Dominic Cummings. Matt Hancock says the then PM said sorry over, quote, the damage that Mr Cummings did to the pandemic response. He also said the Prime Minister's senior advisor attempted to centralise power to himself and worked without Mr Johnson's approval. The spokesperson for Boris Johnson has declined to confirm or deny the claims. Members of ASLEF have voted overwhelmingly to continue strike action for the next 6 months in their ongoing dispute over pay. The announcement comes as members at 16 train companies are refusing to work overtime. That's from today until next Saturday. The companies said they will operate as many trains as possible, but some areas may have no services. The union is blaming the government for not negotiating. The Rail Delivery Group says that drivers have been offered a £5,000 pay rise. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now let's get back to Patrick.
Well, that exclusive interview with Nigel Farage's girlfriend coming your way very shortly. But before that, we've got some other news to address, because is the government just rearranging the decking on the Titanic when it comes to migrant hotels? We're spending about £8.2 million a day on migrant hotels, and they pledged to get rid of 50 of them ASAP. But it looks like migrants are being moved out of one hotel and just bussed into others. It's emerged that migrants in a Folkestone hotel in Kent were just shifted to sites in London and Bournemouth. So is this really going to save us money? I'm not sure it will. I suspect that it might have just been a token attempt to pretend to be doing something. We saw a couple of days ago, didn't we, that the Home Office officials didn't really have a clue if anyone had been deported after failing with their asylum application. That is, of course, if they've even processed anybody. And today, Rishi Sunak, he stood up in Dubai at COP28, the climate conference, and he told us, didn't he, about the Rwanda plan. It's going to save us billions of pounds in the long run, and how we've still got a really close relationship with Rwanda.
This is such a vital issue for the UK, so it's important that we get the details of all of this right, but that's what we're doing. We're in the process of finalising it, and I look forward to bringing these proposals before Parliament and the British public soon, and they will make it crystal clear that Rwanda is a safe country for the purposes of our scheme.
Well, look, bearing in mind that this guy's just appointed someone who allegedly thinks the Rwanda scheme is, and I'm quoting now, batshit, and doesn't believe in even considering leaving the ECHR as our Home Secretary, I think he might just be fiddling while Rome burns. He knows that by the time that they've updated the legal wording, put it through Parliament and it's been dragged through the courts, he probably won't be in office. So we'll never actually be confronted with the situation of him having to be the man who gets flights to Rwanda off the ground at all costs. I don't think his heart's in it. I think he's much more at home talking about artificial intelligence. Presumably he thinks the public doesn't have any real intelligence, because we can all see that his heart's not in it at all when it comes to illegal or legal migration. But to respond to all of this now, I'm joined again by former BBC Chief Political Correspondent John Sargent. I've got TOWIE star Junaid Ahmed and the editor-at-large for the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths. Charlotte, again, I'll start my way with you and work my way down the panel. Do you think he is now gratuitously lying to the British public about how much he cares about things like Rwanda?
Well, I think by how much he cares, well, he says he cares a lot about the details, doesn't he? Yet he didn't think anyone would notice the details that he's moving migrants out of hotels in Kent into hotels in London, which, by the way, presumably are more expensive. I think hotel rooms in London are extremely expensive, and some of them are in Pimlico and Belgravia even. So I suppose he just doesn't really care that much. Or he hopes that we don't, but it's obviously a really pressing issue that we all care about deeply.
Yeah, I mean,
make it work.
John, your views on that then, really, because there seems to be a lot of duplicitous behaviour that takes place. I know that's nothing new for politics, but it's just annoying, isn't it? Which is this idea of, right, look, we're going to shut 50, we're going to come down, close 50 migrant hotels. Right, fine, but you're still putting them in other hotels.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is that they've got about a backlog of around 30,000 people who are asylum seekers whose claims have not been processed. Now, if they don't get that down rapidly, you've got all sorts of people who they've got to look after, they've got to put somewhere, and that's where the reality comes in, and therefore you think, what do we do now? Because we've said we must get them out of hotels. What happens now? You can't move them into the community to earn jobs because they've not had their application processed. You've got the shambles now of the Rwanda campaign, which, as far as I'm concerned, they're just not going to get past the lawyers.
Not
it's all very well saying, we'll produce proposals soon, but why don't they... the idea that you'll get something, and the proposals seem to be that we'll get the Parliament, our Parliament, to say that Rwanda is a safe country. Well, you can't just say, well, we'll vote for that. It's either a safe country or it's not. But the Supreme Court judges took evidence on this point from outside experts. Well, if they do that again, you can't simply say, but the House of Commons have voted that it's a safe country. I mean, it's either it is or it isn't.
A lot of people would argue that you should just do that. Because at the end of the day, you know, we are a democracy. This is a really interesting point about we are a democracy, but we also have a rule of law. So when the public vote for a party that says they want to control immigration and get tough on asylum seekers and all of this stuff, illegal asylum seekers, I should say, then they expect there's something to be done about that. But then I suppose if you get a Supreme Court that pops up and says, well, the actual policy is not legal in our view, then where do you land on that? Janae, can I ask you, how do you feel about the Rwanda scheme and sending people to Rwanda to be processed?
I'll be honest, I think immigration itself has been a talking point for so many years, and are we actually getting any further with it? I think the fact of moving them from hotels to hotels is just, what is even going on? I mean, personally, for me, it just makes me a bit sad, really. I just think where is the end point for this? Do we actually see the Rwanda scheme actually happening? Will it actually make a difference? Will it actually happen itself? Do you know what I mean? And I think at the end of the day, there's so many opinions on this from so many different people. What is actually going to be the end goal? Will it actually happen? And are we actually taking people's feelings into consideration by moving to one place to another? For me personally, there's so much going on. My little brain sometimes can't handle it.
No, I think fair enough. OK. And Charlotte, go on, add to this then. What do you think about it?
Well, he was saying, you know, people moving from one place to the other, think about the actual people, weren't you? And I think that's a good point, because although they can't integrate, like John said, by getting jobs, some of them in Kent actually had started to form communities and study. Some of them were studying, getting an education in one way or another. And they've just been heaved up and shoved somewhere else. And it's kind of very damaging to integration.
Could I ask, though, should the priority not be people who are already here and British taxpayers? And therefore, who's thinking of those feelings? People are voting for things that, you know, mean that they want to control all of this. Every time the public are surveyed, the Rwanda scheme is actually nowhere near as deeply unpopular as you would like to believe if you read certain news outlets. And the public seems to be being left behind in all of this. We can consider other people's feelings as much as we like, but what about our own, John?
No, I mean, as you can see the public feeling on this incredibly strong. People want immigration brought down. They want it to be fair. They want it to be controlled. It was obviously one of the main reasons why people voted for Brexit, because the promise was that we would take control. Everyone would be able to see what would happen. None of those things have come to fruition, partly because the lawyers are always busy sort of thinking, well, if we do a bit of this, a bit of that.
There's a cottage industry.
And it's not a simple equation of the public feel this, therefore it's right,
but
and therefore it's true.
There's such a big industry at the moment. There's such a big industry. You've got the actual human traffickers who are, you know, real-world criminals getting involved in this. You've also then got certain groups, you know, ostensibly charity groups, who I think sometimes do certainly not do anything to stop the illegal crossing of human beings, right? And the risks that all come with that. You've then got an army of lawyers that you're alluding to. You've got groups that are charged with doing the security at these hotels. You add all of that up, and this is billions and billions and billions of pounds. There's a guy who facilitates a lot of these hotels was one of Britain's highest earners last year. There is not a huge incentive for people to get that down. Janae, can I ask you, do you think people shy away, you know, out there in the real world, etc., maybe your friend group, etc., do you think they shy away from talking about immigration? When they hear it coming up, do they just retreat?
I think in some cases, potentially, yes. I think the understanding of it, do people actually fully understand the behind the scenes of it, the actual facts about it? And I think, especially for people around my age, do we actually know so much about it? I've learned by doing research today quite a bit more about it than I ever did know, if I'm being completely honest. Is that information accessible to everyone? Is it being spoken about so more people can understand it? I think that is the thing in today's society. Do we actually know the facts and figures about it? Quite a lot of us here are well into
But also, you make a really good point, because we had a sitting this week. There's a scrutiny committee which has gone down in infamy now, where you say, do we know all the facts and figures about it? Well, you have a committee designed to grill the people who are supposed to be enforcing this, the top civil servants at the Home Office, and they're asked really basic questions like how many asylum seekers that have been found to not have a case for asylum have been deported in the last... I mean, he started out last few weeks, then he went months, then he went years, and they didn't have an answer for any of that. And then he went, well, how many people are basically on the run? Okay, and it turned out it was 17,000 people. And then they were asked a load of other questions as well. You really have to tease it out. So I don't think we're as well informed as we should be on this stuff, are we, Sean?
I don't think so. I saw that as well. He was completely and utterly clueless, wasn't he? And they just don't know the numbers. And when they do grab at a number or claw up a number, you just don't have any faith that they really know. Are they just saying 17,000 because it sounds like something they should say?
I think also they're just so worried when it's a simple point of saying, look, are you an immigrant? What do you mean I'm a immigrant? Where are you from? Oh, I can't have that. But look, can we just say, where were you brought up? I'm not sure I want to answer that. So,
how old are you? That's a big issue.
So you get, the whole sort of business of let's be careful in this area means that the sort of simple point about who are these 17,000 who haven't bothered to complete the process.
But it's not rocket science, is it? It's not rocket science. If you've made the effort to come from wherever you've come to...
I think it's very difficult.
No, but you've not the effort to come from wherever you've come to, and you think there's a whiff that somebody might be about to deport you somewhere, you'd leg it, wouldn't you? Which exactly what people have been doing. Coming up in my exclusive interview with Nigel Farage's other half, Laura Ferrari, she shares some really incredible lines, actually, with me about what it's like to live with a man behind such a big image.
That whatever, you know, if Nigel goes back, I'm not saying he is going to do it.
Yeah.
But he would be a good Prime Minister, I would say that. And I think he would do good.
Yeah, OK, you're not going to want to miss that. But also, I've got the most entertaining paper review that you will get anywhere on the telly in my press pack with tomorrow's newspaper front pages today. We're doing that a bit early. The front pages have just landed, so don't go to bed. If you want to find out all about Nigel Farage's so-called secret girlfriend and also be at top of tomorrow's news. See you in a sec.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, now welcome back. The very first front pages have just been delivered hot off the press, and we're going to be going in with this one that's on the front of the Daily Mail, and it is thousands skip school to go on Gaza marches, so they're back at it. There's also a really interesting exclusive, actually, here, which is Kate's uncle Gary, Scobie is a weasel. So there's some quite interesting stuff there. And here to just digest this is Anna Mikalova, Deputy Political Editor at The Mail on Sunday. So, Anna, I'll bring you straight in on The Mail, if that's all right. So, firstly, children as young as 7 on pro-Palestinian rallies, a report reveals. What's the detail on this, then, as far as we know? Oh, have we lost her? Oh, we lost her.
So this is a report that's just come out that...
Carry on, Anna, carry on.
So reports come out showing that sometimes teachers are even encouraging children to go to marches, to skip school for them, and even telling parents that they'll waive fines, because obviously now there are fines for kids that are truant. And of course, this all massively raises the question of, after COVID, we've had such a problem of children skipping school and being absent from school. And, you know, it's absolutely inexcusable that teachers are turning a blind eye to kids missing even more school to make political statements.
Yeah, this is exactly what a lot of people were expecting to happen, which is how soft touch the school's going to be on this. It turns out incredibly. Can I just get you on this exclusive here that's on the front? Kate's uncle Gary, Scobie is a weasel. That's going to be on pages 8 and 9 of the Daily Mail tomorrow. That plans to be quite explosive, I imagine.
Yeah, I've just read it. He has written an absolutely explosive is the word article about Omid Scobie's new book, and particularly this accidental naming in a manuscript of Kate as allegedly one of the royal racists. And he just destroys Omid Scobie, points out that he's a fantasist, he's got form in being a fantasist, and basically just says, why has he written this absolute takedown of Kate, his niece, who Omid Scobie not only doesn't know, is littered with inaccuracies. So yes, it's definitely worth a read tomorrow.
Yeah, it will be. I think you've done a cracking job of teasing now. I know I'll be going out and buying the Mail first thing. And presumably as well, this, well, possibly got the nod from Kate. I mean, not a lot goes out there about Kate without her maybe knowing about it. But, of course, nobody could ever reveal their sources in that sense. Look, and thank you very much. I'm so sorry it's been so squeezed, but it's because we've got quite a big exclusive coming our way. So I'm just going to bring that to people. That's Anna Mickle over there, Deputy Political Editor at the Mail on Sunday. Cracking front page on the Mail. I've just about got time, well, to run through the other front pages. So here we go. We are going in with the Eye. So, revealed, house cigarette giants are plotting to block new UK smoking ban. So the tobacco lobby getting involved there. We go to the Times. Johnson, my COVID decisions saved lives, but mistakes were made. Ex-PM will tell inquiry. There's a leak going on, basically, about everything that Boris Johnson is going to tell the COVID inquiry. The Independent, King Charles, we are headed for dangerous uncharted territory. No, he's not talking about you, Harry, they say. King ignores royal racism row. The Sun, well, yes, royals face split beyond repair. Endgame. BBC name King as royal at centre of race row. They're just saying that relations between Charles and Harry are even lower than they were. We go to the Mirror. Oh, I'm a Celebrity exclusive. Get him out of there. Viewers were last night urged to boot Nigel Farage out of I'm a Celebrity over his divisive views. Labour MP Nadia Whittome said he is a deeply poisonous influence who should be denied a platform. Interesting, isn't it? Because he's not actually done a single thing wrong since he's been in there. So maybe that's why they want to cancel him. The Daily Express, don't believe doubters. Rwanda migrant deal is on. We've spoken a bit about that tonight. Now, I'm going to whiz through my panel. Charlotte, can I just start with you on this one? Now, I have got an exclusive with Nigel Farage, his girlfriend, coming up shortly. At the front of the Mirror, they want him out of there. He's a deeply poisonous influence, they say. He should be denied a platform.
Why? Just because he's Nigel Farage and they're the Mirror? I can't see any other logic behind it. He's dealt with every accusation of being racist calmly. He's been quite calm in most debates in the jungle. I just think they're just being the Mirror, aren't they? They're just giving him the boot for the sake of it.
Yeah, I mean, I asked Nigel's girlfriend directly about racism claims and what it's like to be surrounded, by the kind of Nigel Farage furore. So we'll hear from that. John, can I just bring you in on this one, if that's all right, but about Boris Johnson at the COVID inquiry. I mean, it's being leaked out what he's going to say, possibly by Boris Johnson, to be fair. It'd be nice if he did it on this channel, but there we go. Former Prime Minister will apologise for debts but defend his government's actions, apparently.
Yeah, no, I think it's he's got a very strong hand that's not been played at all yet, which is that many of the most controversial things that happened during the COVID period, the public were egging the government to make sure that the lockdown took place and that people should be restricted in what they were doing. And the story that's now being told in the inquiry is completely different. There are these people saying, well, we should have locked down or should we have done this? But the public feeling at the time is somehow being left out of the whole discussion. And you feel like saying, I don't know what, let's talk about politics without any reference to politics. And of course, the politics of the time, I remember it very clearly. People were saying, please, we must have more restrictions. We must close down the schools. We must do this.
They were getting hammered.
All the time.
You're killing people. You're not saying
that's it, you're killing people, you're doing nothing. And I think from Boris Johnson's point of view, and I'm sure this will be true when he speaks, people think, oh yeah, perhaps, and he nearly got COVID himself. He did get COVID himself, nearly died. And the idea that he was sort of, a lot of the time, it seemed to me, looking at it from home, I was busy locked up, you felt at least Boris is trying to be cheerful. At least he's trying to keep the show on the road, even though they clearly haven't a clue what's going on. Nobody knew what was going on.
Junaid, are you a bit over, COVID chat? Is it, or do you feel as though people need to be held to account? What do you think?
I think it was a huge turning point for most. I mean, none of us have ever experienced anything like it, being in lockdown, do you know what I mean? I think people will still have their opinions. A lot of people suffered during the time. For some people, it was slightly easier. I mean, for me personally, at the time during COVID, I actually worked in a bank, and we was working through COVID restrictions, 2-metre rules, and I saw the frustration from when it first started, people being really understanding, to by the end of it, people being like, why are we doing 2 metres? It's all over now. So I kind of understand both sides. I get it. I think people will always voice what they want to voice. People have always entitled to their voice. I mean, for me personally, open ears.
Yeah.
Listen.
It's interesting what's coming out. Part of me just thinks this is all hindsight. Hindsight's 2020. There's a load of people lying to cover themselves up, etc. Anyway, are they asking the right questions at these COVID inquiries? I'm not really sure they are. But coming up, my exclusive interview with Nigel Farage's now not-so-secret girlfriend, Laura Ferrari. So she shares some explosive thoughts on Nigel's appearance in the jungle and whether he would actually make a good Prime Minister. She responds to racism allegations and some mistruths put out there in the media about their relationship as well. Make sure you stay tuned. Absolutely no reason to go to bed. Nigel's girlfriend, up next.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
That's the last
Well,
thing
this
they're
exclusive with Nigel Farage's girlfriend, Laura, is incredibly timely because at the front of the Mirror, they've just done quite a big number on him, really. They've used 2 Labour Party members, Labour MP Nadia Whittome and her colleague, Kim Johnson, to call for Nigel Farage to be booted out of the jungle for things like having a deeply poisonous influence and pursuing a racist narrative. I think it is interesting, isn't it? Because I'm just reading here that Nadia Whittome held a Commons meeting with an activist who said that plotting Zionists would be removed from the Middle East. Also reading here about Kim Johnson having to apologise earlier this year for calling Israel a fascist state. So it would be fascinating to maybe get them on the show so they can justify their views. But as Nigel makes waves in the jungle, we are, of course, missing him here at GB News. And I did have a chance to sit down with his girlfriend, Laura Ferrari, for the very first time. She's never done a television interview before, to learn a little bit more about the man and also for her to respond to some of the claims that have been out there in recent days. So, Laura, how are you?
I'm great. I'm doing well.
A little bit nervous?
Just a bit, yeah. It's not exactly the sort of thing I usually do, but hey, you know, because it's you, because it's GB News, I think I should be part, of it and do my bit.
Now, you don't court publicity, that's fair to say. This is very unusual for you. So why did you decide that you wanted to do an interview today?
Well, I suppose to show a bit of, support for Nigel, and also I've been reading all sorts of, nonsensical articles about me being a secret girlfriend. I'm not secret, I'm here, I'm here. All our friends, all our, family members know who I am. So I sort of, want to come out. I'm not the secret girlfriend. I do exist and I do support Nigel. It's very important for me to say that.
How did it make you feel reading some of those things?
Well, it's a bit upsetting because it's all news as well. I don't know, it's just full of inaccuracies, really. Like, apparently I'm a French politician. Well, if I were a French politician, I would be doing a very bad job, drinking in an English pub. That wouldn't be great. That would be a good start. And things like, you're a bit of everything. And I think that what the journalists have been doing really is they've been a bit lazy and sort of taking, the old news and trying to turn it into new news. But it's fake news. So anyway, I didn't feel great, but hey, that's what the press is like, isn't it?
Well, I mean, you're obviously an incredibly strong lady, but it must have taken a bit of guts to watch Nigel in the jungle.
No, that's the easy bit. You must be joking. It's the easy bit. I want to see him because the worst thing really in life is because we are not in touch, they can't communicate with the outside world. So I haven't spoken to him in days, what is it, is it 15 days, something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm pleased to see him, even if it's not always nice, I'd rather see him doing nasty things rather than not see him at all, if that makes sense. So I'm all for it.
So that first night that he went in and the first footage that went out, what was it like for you? Were you a bit nervous? No, seriously, I wasn't, because I actually believe in him. I know that if anyone can do it, that's him. He's so resilient. I mean, he has the resilience of a million men. He's mentally strong, and also he likes a challenge. He likes a new challenge, And I think he sees this as a bit of an experience, a new experience. So, no, I think he's doing great and I'm fully confident. Let's talk about some of the things that have been going on in the jungle. Now, we are very much at the mercy of the edit.
Of course.
When it comes to these things, which I think was probably the biggest gamble for him going in there.
Yeah.
Especially with the way the media is often quite stacked against him.
Yeah.
So there was a couple of head-to-heads with Fred and Arch Remainer.
I know.
Go on. What do you make of that?
Oh, he annoyed me. And don't forget, I'm a French, I'm a French person myself. And I was like, well, isn't it a bit rude to come from a different country and lecturing the British electorate or, anyone about, the way the British people voted in 2016? I'm just thinking, well, how would I feel being in France if an Englishman or a German person, even worse, came just to say, hey, you voted badly, shame on you, and why did you? I just think it's out of place, to be honest with you. But to be fair to Fred, he made peace with Nigel, and then they shared a couple of jokes, and that was it. And then I think he came back, did he?
A bit.
Yeah, a bit. But that's fine. It's fine.
And Nigel's used to these discussions, and I mean, he didn't back down, did he?
It's easy peasy. These people are really they're not your problem. He's been dealing with enemies and attacks and jokes for decades, like we're talking about actually serious stuff like death threats or, threats on your family members and things like that. So having an argument with Fred or Nella is really not going to faze him at all. He'd be fine.
I think that the Nella thing, which you've raised there, she essentially accused him of being a racist or not being popular with black people specifically, she said. She also blamed that on the internet, that she read on the internet.
I know.
How do you think Nigel dealt with that?
Very well, and I feel sorry for Nella. I think she epitomises that snowflake generation where they are told that they should be offended by every little thing. And it's not a good place to be when you're offended and upset all the time. You know, it's quite, you know, it's not really nice. And I think he has been very gently with her. But again, that's the sort of man he is. Maybe ITV or people were expecting him to be a bit more, like, punchy and a bit more aggressive. But he has lots of patience. He understands people, and he actually understands this generation very well.
And that's one of the reasons why he's in there, isn't it? To try to connect with a wider audience.
Yes, what a good move.
You think it's a good move?
It's like back in the days when people say, don't do TikTok, you know, you're wasting your time and so on and so forth. I don't know for how long he's been doing TikTok now, but quite a few months. The number of people, young black people, have been stopping him in the street to say, hey, can we do a selfie with you? Has been astonishing. So in that sense, doing The Jungle, doing I'm a Celeb, Get Me Out of Here, was 100% the right decision.
And the way that he's handled some very controversial topics in there, the cultural appropriation stuff, is difficult for most people at the best of times, especially when you can feel, I think, like you're only seconds away from maybe tripping up. But
why? Why? I don't understand this. I mean, people have lost any sense of fun, any sense of... So, for instance, you know, I do... You know, Beaujolais Nouveau Party, the theme is you have to be dressed as a French person. So people come with a beret. I wear a beret, onions around my necks and around my neck. And that's the thing, you know. I don't know why people want to be offended by, you know, these things. Are just beyond me. But maybe you're right. And he did say yesterday it's probably an age thing.
I think that's an important thing, because actually, to say that there is maybe an age divide, he said that maybe there weren't these sensitivities several years ago. I don't think he's wrong about that.
No, he's right,
And I wonder whether or not ITV and the wider public are seeing a very different man from the man that they expected. But before I come to talk to you about what he's like away from the cameras and away from politics, we have all seen quite a lot of Nigel while he's been in The Jungle. Some of the shower scenes?
Yes, just a bit, yeah.
What do you feel about that?
Do you know what? So the first time we saw his behind on TV, I was sat next to Nigel's mum, right? So we watched the thing together and we looked at each other and we went like, we giggled. Because honestly, at the end of the day, it's just a behind, it's just a bottom, and he's clean. I don't believe in that nonsense of having a shower, wearing your swimming trunks, and it's, you know, he went for it. It was like, you know, yeah, he's a clean man, you see.
He's a clean man.
He's very clean.
He wanted a proper wash.
He wants a proper wash. He likes the camp to be tidy.
Yes.
Right? Because it's very important.
It's interesting you say that, because there was a scene where he got a little bit angry. Well, not angry.
The rat episode.
The rat episode.
I know.
He got ratty about the rats.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe that showed the kind of man that he is. You know, quite disciplined and organised and not afraid to tell people...
No.
What's what in that sense? Do you recognise that?
I think he has shown leadership, but in a nice way. Just saying, hey guys, we have to live together for quite a long while. We do not want rats, you know, in the camp. Let's be organised. Can you imagine Boris Johnson? I don't know if we can say that, but can you imagine Boris Johnson in a camp? You know, be thousands of rats everywhere. Well, you don't want, you know, rodents in your camp where you're sleeping, right? It's just dangerous and disgusting. So, and it happened again last night, didn't it? And this time, Fred and him were together on the same page, saying, "Hey, we're going to take charge now, and there's no messing about."
And I know that he's seen by many people as, you know, a big drinker and loves to have his cigarettes and all of that stuff. How do you think he's coping in there without drinking? I think he looks quite well.
He looks amazingly well. I mean, I look at him and I say, "Oh, you haven't looked so well since I've met him, really." But it's true. And I think I would do that to anyone, because if you think about our daily habits, whether it's coffee or tea or alcohol, or we are abusing our bodies in a sense. I'm not saying that coffee's bad, but if you drink too much, then it's not good, and so on and so forth. And I just think, you know, looking at him, he's looking extremely well. He's got a bit of a tan. He looks quite happy and relaxed with his campmates. I think he's having a blast.
Yeah, and that's important because you know it better than anyone, really.
Yeah.
So when you see his interactions in there, you think he's in his element.
Yeah. And I think that his campmates are really good, very nice to him. So I know that sometimes with the edits, you may think that, oh, they keep having a go at him. I don't believe that for 1 second he would look so relaxed and happy if his campmates were picking on him every day. So I think there's quite a camaraderie that you don't really see on screen. But he looks very, very relaxed, very content, very in his element. He's in his element. He's an outdoorsy person. He loves, sleeping, outdoors and fishing and doing all sorts of things. So he wouldn't be out of, he'd be happy. He is happy. I can tell he's happy in that context.
And you think he could go all the way to the end?
Yeah. It's I think he will make it to the finalists.
And you'll be there
I
to
will.
greet him, because this was another thing that was said initially, wasn't it? That you won't be there,
No. She won't go to Australia to welcome him. Basically, wanting people to think that he's a Billy No Mate and nobody wants to welcome him. No, of course I'll be there. Of course I will be there. I miss him. I want to see him. I want to hug him.
Oh, bless you. It's really sweet, isn't it? And why do you love him so much?
Because he's a nice man. He really is. He's genuinely a nice, gentle person. He's very patient, which is great because he's very patient with me. And he's fun and he's entertaining and he's loyal. He's a good egg.
Okay, now this interview is very much in two parts. So that was the quite light, fluffy stuff about I'm a Celebrity and the initial things about that. But in the next part, and Law gives her verdict on whether Nigel could make it into number 10, but also how his life and his political life affects her as well. Back in two.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, Nigel's girlfriend, Law, is speaking on camera for the first time. The first part was, quite fluffy, I suppose. But this next part now, she delves into whether he has a chance at making it to be Prime Minister, but also how his political life affect her? And she answers questions about racism allegations, etc. Let's take it away. What's it like behind the scenes with Nigel? I mean, we're in his local now, aren't we?
Yes.
Really? And he comes here quite a bit.
Yes, that's our local pub. With a Christmassy vibe.
Nigel, away from the cameras, away from the pressures of television and politics,
Yes.
what's he like?
An ordinary bloke. He goes shopping to a local supermarket. He just goes to the butcher. He comes here. He gardens. He's just a normal person. The only thing is a bit of a workaholic. So I will say that, and that is quite noticeable. So he does work a lot. So from, he gets up at 4 a.m, something like that, and starts working from 5. And then the day, and of course you know that he's got his show on GB News, which is from 7 to 8. So he really works from 5 a.m. until 8 p.m. So these are long days. So that's the only thing that might be different from your average person. But apart from that, he just enjoys the same thing you enjoy.
Yeah. What's that like for you? Because behind every some people will call him a great man. Behind every great man, there's usually a great woman.
That's what they say.
That's what they say. But what's that like for you? Because it must be tough. He works all the time, very, very active, both socially and professionally, very driven.
Yes.
As well.
Oh, yeah.
Knows his own mind.
Yeah.
What's that like for you?
It's great. Means he's out of my way most of the time. It's brilliant. He does his thing, I do my thing. No, it's a good thing, I believe in, people who have convictions and motivations in life, and he's, as you say, he's really driven. So, for me as a woman, it's a good thing.
Dealing with some of the issues where a lot of people want Nigel to fail at everything.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
And possibly because of the nature of the kind of work that he's in and been involved in, but also the nature of the British press and the global media. There can be a lot of intrusion there. There can be a lot of allegations of things like racism, for example.
Oh, yeah.
People lob out there.
Dear.
Yeah, you roll your eyes there. Why?
I mean, look, I've never heard Nigel say anything racist, in my life. And I'm quite a religious person, and I would never say that if I didn't. I swear to God, he's never said anything racist in front of me. And if he was a racist, I would be the first person to know. I wouldn't tolerate it myself. So it really annoys me. And I think that's what people have been doing over the years, is to amalgate, to mix the, controlled immigration theme with being a racist, which, it's crazy. All the countries in the world are, managing the borders and want controlled immigrations, and we are no different. So I don't know how they've managed to do that, but somehow they have, and it's worked, you see, because when you see the reaction of people like Fred or Nella, they are buying this narrative, because that's what they've been hearing for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. So of course they are going to meet Nigel in the jungle, and the first thing they're going to go is, hey, you're a racist, or hey, but it couldn't be, further from the truth.
No, indeed. And yeah, obviously, if he does well, or however well he does, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? But what do you think he wants to do when he comes out of the jungle?
Have a good meal. Oh, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. In terms of, well, in order to answer this question, I think that you need to keep in mind why he went in the jungle in the first place. And it was very clear that it was to reach to a larger audience. Why would you do that if you didn't have an ulterior motive in mind? And I think potentially, possibly, I can't, speak for him, but, he might be considering going back to politics at some stage, And if you want to do that, and if you want to win an election, of course you need to reach to a larger audience, especially to the young people who do not really do TV or do not do politics, and will be voters one day, if they're not voting already, that is. So I don't know. I'm not saying that's what he wants to do. It's probably what he doesn't want to do. But the truth of the matter is, does he have a choice?
What do you mean by that? Does he have a choice?
Well, you know, if you look, there's no arguing that Nigel loves his country, right? And that's why he campaigned for Brexit, because it was too damning to see a country being run by a foreign body somewhere in Brussels. So that's why he was so determined and focused on Brexit. Now, Brexit was delivered badly, very badly. The successive prime ministers, how many have we had?
Loads.
Yeah,
Too many,
exactly. I've done a bad job at trying. Well, they haven't even tried. They haven't even tried, you know. And so it's heartbreaking for him, for people like me, for our friends, for our family, for this country, to see that when, you know, we're being run by idiots. We are run by idiots, technically. I'm sorry for saying this, but I'm sure it's the same. You know, your viewers will share the same opinion. In that sense, Nigel probably will think that he has a duty to come back to politics. It's a duty thing.
How do you feel about that? Because if he's successful and he's as successful as you possibly could be in politics, which would make you prime minister, that would have a massive impact on your life, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's really not on my bucket list, I'm going to be honest with you. I just that's the last thing I want. But it's not about what you want, I think, in life sometimes. It's about what is best, you know? And yeah, I mean, life has been quite enjoyable over the last few years, you know. He's loving his job at GBNews, you know. We have 2 dogs, we walk them, we come here, you know, it's great. Of course, the day you walk in number 10, it stops, right? You can forget about all the things you enjoy in life, and it's the pressure and it's the little, you know, funny tactics of the establishment, and it's not going to be nice. You know, if you look at Trump, Trump is going through right now, just on the basis that he's going to run again, you're just thinking, oh, well, what is Nigel going to face if he's officially standing again?
That must be quite daunting, really. I mean, you've obviously thought about it.
Oh, yeah.
So you've weighed that up and you've come to your own conclusions about that. But that must be quite scary.
I think so, yeah. It is scary. It is scary. Much scarier than the jungle, I can tell you that. The jungle is just like a walk in the park, really, when you think about it, because being a prime minister is just such heavy responsibilities on your shoulders, but on the, you know, also keeping in mind that they've done such a bad job that you can only do a better job. So in that context, I think that it becomes a bit less scary. I think that whatever, you know, if Nigel goes, but I'm not saying he is going to do it.
Yeah.
But he would be a good prime minister. I would say that, and I think he would do a good job at it.
Interesting. And he's obviously going to have to deal with a lot of flack there and a lot of opposition. But you think he's capable of doing that and not getting sucked into, you know, the establishment, as it were?
Oh, well, the establishment will always be there, and we see it every day. Oh, and they are getting ready already. You know, they have, you know, that's the establishment for you, and it doesn't happen overnight. So for the last few years, actually since probably he started his work with GBNews, he's gained influence, hasn't he? You know, and I think they're freaking out a bit, to be honest with you. They're starting to threaten. They're starting to go like, "Ooh, is he going to do it or not?"
When you first started seeing Nigel, it was quite a long time ago now, actually, wasn't it? Did you just track that for me then? Because that's quite a journey, isn't it, for you personally?
Well, I don't know. In what sense?
Well, I suppose when he started out, you know, European Parliament.
Yeah.
There's been goodness knows how many elections, both.
By the way, I never worked for him. I just want to.
Oh yeah. Oh,
yeah,
go on.
That was another thing. Like, I worked for Nigel Farage, and he appointed me at these, you know, well-paid. I never did that. Never worked for him ever in my life. He never, you know, gave me any particular job. So Just wanted to. But yeah, so since he he came out of the European Parliament.
Did you ever think that you'd be sitting down having a conversation? And I was listening to the radio on the way up here, and it is now a mainstream conversation to discuss about the possibility of Nigel Farage one day being Prime Minister. Okay. Did you ever think when you first met him that you would be having those conversations?
To some extent, yes. I know it's surprising. I know it's very surprising, but I think that, I don't know, was it General de Gaulle that said that he always had this feeling that he was, and I think Churchill said the same thing. So obviously I'm not I'm not as important, but you can see sometimes the potential in someone, can't you? And of course I'm biased. Of course I'm biased because he's my special, special man in my life. But you can see the potential in someone, and you can see, look, you are clearly the best person in the UK right now to do the job. You're the best person. He's the best man.
One last one. How do you think Nigel's going to feel when he comes out of the jungle and realises we've done an interview?
I think he's going to hate it. I tell you why. It's because he doesn't like compliments. So if you just, if you pay compliments in public, he goes all shy, like, oh, stop it. So me doing that with you, and then, and obviously praising his work and praising how well he's doing in the jungle, he's going to be extremely embarrassed, which is good.
Good. Well, Laura, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Very much.
Thank you,
for
Patrick.
somebody who doesn't do a lot of these things, you're incredibly good at it.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Maybe you'll have your own show soon. Who knows, though? But thank you.
With you, though.
I'd do it. Yeah. Oh, well, Laura Ferrari there, an absolutely wonderful woman, and I'm sure that came across very well. I must say that it was not her in a natural environment there. Lots of stuff to unpack, and no doubt the press will do that, and right here at GB News we will do that over the course of the next day or so. But I'd just like to thank Laura for doing that interview, and let us know your thoughts on it as well. GBViews at gbnews.com. I'll be back again on Monday from 9 p.m. Up next is Headliners. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Good night.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Headliners is just seconds away, but first, our top stories this hour. Greenpeace has accused Rishi Sunak of showing no leadership over climate change after he failed to mention phasing out fossil fuels during his speech at COP28. Addressing the summit in Dubai, the Prime Minister announced £1.6 billion for international climate finance and promised that the government's green policies will not hurt taxpayers' pockets. He also urged major polluting countries to follow the UK's lead in slashing emissions.